All right, good evening. It is March 22nd, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Lunenburg School Committee to order. And we are meeting completely remote this evening via Zoom, so I would ask Dr. Burnham to begin.
Good evening, everyone. As a preliminary matter, this is Dr. Burnham, Superintendent of Schools. I will do a roll call to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Chair, Mrs. Carol Ashambo.
Yes.
Vice Chair, Mr. Brian Leighton.
Yes.
Secretary, Mrs. Laura Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Anthony Scombrini.
Yes.
Mr. Peter Beardmore.
Yes.
I do not see a student representative this evening. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Recording Secretary, Ms. Courtney Fuller.
Here. What about my pizza?
Business Manager, Mr. Michael Cassidy.
Here.
And our Facility and Ground Director, Mr. Steve Pusateri.
Present.
And I'll turn it back to you, Mrs. Archambault.
Thank you. In accordance with the requirements of open meeting law, please be advised this meeting is being recorded and is being broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel 99. And we'll stream on Facebook Live at a later time. And this meeting of the Lunenburg School Committee is being in accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Public meetings may be conducted remotely. The order, which you can find posted on the town website on the COVID-19 Information Center page, accessed through the town manager's web page, excuse me, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment and also our budget public hearing. For this meeting, the Lunenburg School Committee is convening by telephone conference, video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying on how the public may join. For Zoom meetings, please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that you take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda, and then I will ask members of the committee for comments. Please hold until your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. Speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. And each vote taken at this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. Our first order of business this evening is public comments, and the school committee welcomes comments from the public. Comments addressing topics under the scope and authority of the school committee are welcome at either public comment section. Please remember this is public comment, not discussion, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Each public comment section has a maximum of 10 minutes. Comments about individual students are prohibited by state and federal law. So do we have any comments first from the committee this evening? Mr. Beardmore?
Thank you. I recognize that we are under a bit of a time crunch tonight. And I apologize, my comments are going to be a little bit long tonight, but this is partially in response to some previous public comment and partially in response to some conversations and communications that I've uncovered in the last couple of weeks. Tonight's agenda includes a public hearing on the superintendent's recommended budget and a vote by the school committee. Included in the budget is support for the district's social and emotional learning program and curriculum. It is, to the best of my recollection, the first actual vote that I will take as a school committee member that implicitly endorses these services via the school committee's budget authority. Over the course of the last several months, there has been a series of public comments relating to this topic that I have found to be very helpful. I've also received and been forwarded some emails, some of which was not so helpful. I've been advised of points of view that I was previously unaware of in some circumstances. And in some cases, I don't share their opinions. I've also found the research shared by Mr. Scullambrini, the knowledge, experiences, and opinions shared by Mrs. Archambault, and background information provided by the superintendent and the curriculum team to be most helpful. I've also consulted with people close to me. My dad was a career educator, a special education teacher, and nationally recognized alternative education innovator and leader. He was a department chair and an adjunct professor in the graduate education department at Fitchburg State. My mom was a school nurse and served on this committee for many years. My former wife is a career educator and doctoral candidate. And I've also reached out to many other parents of varying opinions and a few other recognized experts in this field. Here is what I think today on March 22nd, 2023. I think that our SEL curriculum is needed. I think we have climate issues in Lunenburg that need to be improved upon in order for us to deliver on our mission. There's a Maslow's hierarchy of sorts at play here, and the social and emotional well-being of our students, their sense of safety and connectedness and inclusion, their ability to positively connect themselves to both our community and the subjects they're learning are all foundational. And I think that logically, SEL should contribute to academic achievement. But sitting here today, I don't know for sure that it does. I can say that some people, some very qualified experts, have told me that it does. Moreover, there are regulatory and compliance standards that are pushing us down this path anyways. As I alluded to last week, there are findings in a recent DESE audit that in my mind underscore that we are moving in the right direction. And I expect that the administration will outline some of this in a near future meeting. Folks, as I've said, I'm not an educator or particularly learned in these topics. I'm guided by what I read, what I hear, what I know about this town and the school department and the people in both, and my own personal experiences. I am a well-credentialed budget hawk in the town of Lunenburg. Of all the people engaged in political dialogue in Lunenburg, I have got to be in the top 10 when it comes to budget hawks. I wouldn't be voting to spend money if I didn't think we need to. I think we need to. I mentioned my own personal experiences a moment ago, and I've mentioned in previous meetings how I think of parenting, developing social and emotional tools, and my own personal challenges in these areas. And I want to share a personal experience that probably most informs my position on this and on equity, which is a word that I've been recently asked to define. I remember as a child, maybe in the first or second grade, I had a classmate who, when I first met him, I thought he was a girl. He looked like a girl. I can't say that in 1979 or 1980 that he dressed like a girl, but he didn't dress like a boy. And a few years later, he befriended another classmate who was a boy, but put on absolutely no masculine effects whatsoever throughout the course of our years in Lunenburg. They were different. They were treated differently. I can't imagine they ever felt particularly welcome. At times, they were bullied and they were ostracized. And I think about them often. And I know other members of my class do also, because I've begun describing them recently to other Lunenburg alumni of my era. And every single time that I've begun describing them, my audience immediately blurts out their names. They are remembered. I'm told one of them began transitioning after graduation and became an advocate in the trans community. And I don't know what happened with the other one. To my recollection, I never engaged in bullying them. But I never intervened or helped. I didn't have the empathy or the courage or the emotional tools that today I wished I had had then. And you'd think, given my background, that I should have, but I didn't. And so when I think about equity, and when I read surveys that indicate that a statistically relevant number of respondents don't feel welcome or included, or that there isn't a trusted adult, I immediately ask for the crosstabs. I want to identify the gaps. I want to know if we're systematically missing cohorts, such as LGBTQ+ or racial groups, or students with disabilities, or any other cohorts. And when I read emails from parents that indicate disgust and hostility directed at any group, I'm very inclined to do anything I can as a parent, as a community member, and as a school committee member to help develop some of the tools that are compulsory for the school community in Lunenburg that I envision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beardmore. And do we have any public comments then from the public? I do have one person on a telephone. If you wish to make a public comment, you can sing out and do so.
Hi, this is Rhonda Licio. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello? Okay.
yes.
This is Rhonda Licio, 181 Reservoir Road. I just have a question regarding the AC project for the primary school. It's my recollection that the project was added after the capital planning process was completed last year. And one of the justifications for reconsideration of the item was because it was necessary to prevent further heat damage to the building. So my question is, will moving forward with the current project also prevent further heat damage to the school? And if not, I question whether or not the scope of the current project is the same as the one approved at town meeting. The primary school is a relatively new building in comparison to others in town. And I think we should be doing our best to maintain it so that it doesn't end up like TCP or Turkey Hill. And I'm also wondering how much will it cost to repair the damage which has already occurred and any additional damage if the current project does not adequately control the climate over the summer when the building is vacant. And if you could address those during your discussion later on, that would be great.
Thank you. We will do that.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right then. Seeing no further public comment, I don't believe I do. Then what we will do is move on the chair's report, which will be brief. I wish to remind the public there will be 2 school committee openings on the May election ballot. Mr. Beardmore is running for his seat and 1 additional seat is open. If you are interested, please attend the town caucus Monday, March 27th to submit your name. The caucus begins at 7 p.m. at the middle high school. You can also get your name on the ballot by pulling papers after the caucus. And Dr. Burnham and Mr. Cassidy will be presenting the FY24 school budget to the Finance Committee at 8:30 this evening. And I thank them very much for doing that. And the school committee will meet again on Wednesday, April 5th. So that being said, we do not have any minutes. And we do not have any line item transfers that I can see. So we would go on to our budget hearing. So I would like to call the budget hearing to order. And the way we will do this is Dr. Burnham will make a abbreviated presentation of our budget. The budget, it's all its details, and the complete slide deck has been posted and parents have been told how to access them. But we will do just a small part of this evening in case the public wishes to comment. Okay.
And I would invite Mr. Cassidy to join me in presenting an abbreviated slide deck to hit the highlights of the budget. So this was the budget that we brought forward as the recommended budget and did a full presentation at the meeting on March 15th. You can see that the recommended budget is a 2.5% increase from the FY23 budget. And you can see the breakout on this particular slide for personnel related costs and non-personnel related increases. This budget does include all contractual increases, such as step increases, longevity, and degree advancements. It does factor in health insurance at an increase of 6.2% based on new employees and current enrollment. It does factor in the increase in our general education transportation contract, as well as 2 new positions. A teacher of humanities at the high school, that would be a teacher either of ELA, English Language Arts, or history and social studies, as well as a secretary who would handle enrollment, including bus transportation, as well as fulfilling the process coordinator function in the district, which is to establish all of the IEP meetings and schedule all of the testing that accompanies those meetings as well. Just as a reminder, there are some positions that we included in our 5-year staffing plan for year 1 being FY24. Some of those are going to be funded through other funding sources, not the local budget. These are not positions in that 2.5% increase before you this evening. But we will continue to fund a targeted math teacher through ESSER 3 grants. That would be a position at the high school, currently funded with ESSER 2. A psychologist to serve the lower grades at the primary school, that would be funded with our federal special education 240 grant. We would look to continue our tier 1 SEL counselor, again, currently funded with ESSER 2. We would move that to ESSER 3. Both of those ESSER positions, the school committee has already taken up and approved. And again, pending some additional grant funding, we would potentially be looking to maintain a licensed practical nurse in the district, again, if funding is available. But none of these positions are part of the 2.5% budget before you this evening. Important to note that there are still some unknown factors. There are no final negotiations with the custodians or the cafeteria workers, and there are still some individual employee contracts pending. We have no knowledge at this time of any continued COVID-related grant funding. The circuit breaker amount will not be released for some time still, but we're expecting that that value will continue to cover about 65% of the costs for out-of-district transportation as well as the out-of-district placement. And lastly, our federal and state grants, those allocations typically are not announced until sometime late in July, sometimes even early August. But everything that we're hearing, we anticipate that those grants will be funded at the same level as current year. And lastly, where we are in our timeline, budget hearing is this evening for the school committee, following which you will take a vote on the budget. As Mrs. Archambault has already indicated, later this evening, Mr. Cassidy and I will present the budget to the Finance Committee. And then the process is finalized with annual town meeting, May 6th.
Thank you very much. So that is, in a nutshell, the budget presentation. Is there anyone in the public that has any questions for us regarding the budget? I see no hands raised. I'm just going to double check here, but no. So then I am assuming there are no questions from the public on the budget. Is anyone on the board have any questions regarding the budget at this point? I'm not seeing any of those either. So then I will close the public hearing portion of the meeting this evening, and I will ask if there is a motion to approve the superintendent's proposed budget.
I'll make a motion to approve the budget presented tonight.
And a second, please?
I'll second.
I have a procedural question.
Sure thing.
Just procedurally, we are approving a budget which will go to the Finance Committee later tonight and go and be included in the warrant for annual town meeting.
Yes.
Once it's approved, is there an additional step where we actually have to enact the budget, or does it make it automatic by vote of town meeting?
I think, well, as far as I've never seen any other step.
Okay, no, well, if it hasn't happened before and we've
Here.
managed to function okay, I just.
Yes, thus far, it seems to have worked that way. We
I
approved
could
the
offer,
budget. Yeah, go ahead.
typically the way things have worked, once that budget is approved, basically it's that bottom line that's approved at
Right.
town meeting.
Right.
If there need to be any types of adjustments within the budget, different lines, etc., we come before the school committee, make those proposed transfers, bring things into alignment. If a line should need to, if it's been overspent, if it needs to be adjusted, and so on and so forth. Typically, the first time we do that is in the fall,
Okay.
once all of the hiring has been established and we know where adjustments may need to be made with salaries to different buildings, etc. So you do, throughout the course of the year, you do have that authority to enact the budget and expend the budget.
I understand that. It was really directed at sort of between town meeting and the first of the fiscal year, if there's anything formally that would need to happen. But
No.
I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
Okay. So then we have a motion and a second, so we can take a roll call vote.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Leighton,
Yes.
Archambault.
Yes. I'd like to thank Mr. Cassidy and Dr. Burnham and their teams for the hard work that goes into developing this budget. It is not an easy trick at all. And to keep it at 2.5% at this point in time has been yeoman's work. So I thank you all very much for doing that.
Thank you, and thank you for the approval tonight.
Next, we have the primary AC project recommendation. And this also has been a long and winding road. And so I thank people for their hard work, Mr. Pusateri and Mr. Cassidy and Dr. Burnham, on this particular project. So I will turn this back to Dr. Burnham.
And I'd invite Mr. Cassidy to offer commentary here as well. There were some questions presented during public comment relative to the scope of this project and will it accomplish what we all had hoped to accomplish with the original proposal of this project. And it is accurate that through the capital plan process last year, initially the AC project was not part of the plan. It was later added, and there was advocacy at that time around the benefits to the building, the physical structure of the building, because it had been architecturally designed to have some level of climate control. It is true that last spring, Mr. Jeffries did visit the primary school and could see some evidence of stress on the building due to the differentials in the temperatures inside outside because the cooling was not part of the actual executed building. That said, these are projects that can be addressed. You can see some gapping with caulking around windows, etc. Those are all things that can be repaired. That said, will this modified plan satisfy everything that we had originally hoped and intended to accomplish with the original proposed plan? No, because there will still be spaces in the building that are not cooled. Will it help to some degree? I believe that it will, because many of the spaces throughout the building will be cooled. So it would be a partial execution of the scope that we had originally envisioned, but it is the level of execution that we can move forward with, given the funding that was allocated. So our thought is, and it will be for you all to determine, that this falls within the original intended scope that was proposed with the original project. We just don't have the funding to fully execute the full scope of cooling in the building with the monies that we have available. So, you know, it's up to the committee to make the determination as to whether or not this modified plan attempts to execute at least a portion of the original intent of the project. And then we can go from there. As far as what would happen during the summer months when the building is vacant, we could work with Mr. Pusateri to determine what's a minimal level of cooling to take some of the stress off of the warmer parts of the building. And those really are on the south-facing side, and particularly on the second floor, where the heat tends to build and be trapped. I don't know if Mr. Cassidy or Mr. Pusateri have any comment to add relative to that.
I would just kind of emphasize a point that you just made, is that the relief is being provided to the most stressful part of that building, which is the second floor. So any relief is going to support the maintenance of that building. So it's not taking care of the whole building. We'll seek alternative funding over the next few years for that. But this project is going to be addressing the most vulnerable spots in that building.
Hi, Steve Pusateri, Facilities Director. Dr. Burnham, you made reference to Mr. Jeffries, and the caller earlier talked about heat stress and damage in the building. What exactly is the situation, and who is Mr. Jeffries?
Mr. Jeffries is the chair of the select board. He also has a background in facilities.
So what were the determining factors that the assumption has led to this damage? Is it stress fracture? Is it the building settling? What exactly are we talking about as far as heat damage to the inside of the building?
As I referenced, he noted from the architectural design of the building that it never would have been architecturally designed that way unless it was intended to have cooling. So the gables on the second floor, as an example, it traps heat. The vestibule area where heat can rise all the way to the second floor. Again, it was based on the architecture that he's looking at. And a design like that would have factored in cooling. If cooling was not to be part of that plan, then the design of the building would have been different. That said, he looked and noted in a few places, but particularly on the south-facing side in the library, that the caulking along the windows was gapping and pulling away. Again, that's something that we're just going to have to be mindful of and pay attention to, and make sure that we periodically replace that if that's the case. But those were the kinds of things that he was noting initially.
Okay. Thank you. So getting back to the earlier comment about the summer when the building is unoccupied, that there's a reasonable setting that we could provide in the rooms for cooling to prevent any issues with the rooms overheating. And so the project would be, if the project does begin during the summer months of this vacation, summer vacation, it would be completed hopefully before school starts or when school starts. So we would have to address this issue of providing cooling during the summer break, the summer of 2024. But it's definitely something that that is manageable with the systems that are provided.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. Beardmore?
Madam Chair, through you to the superintendent, the question came up last week about the procedure and the town manager and her authority and whether or not this meets the threshold of approval, or how it, that, have you been able to garner any additional information on that?
I did have a conversation with her, and I'm sure you can appreciate that this is a rather unusual circumstance. This isn't something that's routine. So in my conversation with her, she wanted to be sure that if if you chose to move forward with this project, that you are doing so because you believe that it does fulfill, at least in part, the intent of the original capital project request. Assuming that that is the case and that is how the committee feels, and should you vote to approve this modified approach and living within the existing amount of funding that we have, and supplying cooling to the number of rooms that we can with that funding, then I would notify her, and she would then also bring this before the capital planning committee, the finance committee, and the select board. Again, because this is an unusual circumstance, to see if there's consensus, that everybody does agree that this does, you know, at least partially execute the original intent, which was conveyed at town meeting, and therefore was voted and approved for the funding for this project. I think that that's a reasonable way forward. But that's what the discussion was, that if you all agreed that you felt that this fell within the original intent to a smaller scale, that would be the then process that would unfold.
So for what it's worth, and first, I think that is the right approach. Given the circumstances, I think that consensus may be hard to achieve, but a majority of those boards, I think, you know, is probably, in my mind, sufficient, given that it is an unusual circumstance and not something that is specifically accounted for in any of our organizational documents. So my very limited reasoning on this, not being a facilities, really even conversant in facilities topics, as Mr. Pusateri realized when he walked me through the building a month or so ago, is that this is going to hit over 2/3 of the rooms in the building. The office area is already air conditioned. The second floor of the library actually has some units up there, which I was actually surprised to see when I toured the building. The library itself, the bottom floor, I don't think we'll be covering here, but and that is really kind of the heat, the major heat source in the summer, I believe. But I think covering all the rooms, and I know there's some question about the offices in the second floor, and I have some reservations about those. But covering all the rooms in the second floor and some rooms in the first floor, we're going to cover about more than 2/3 of the rooms in the building. That's not the open shared space in the hallways and atrium and that sort of thing. But I think to solve the biggest part of the problem, which is it's not suitable for education on really hot days in September and June in particular, I think that this goes a long, long, long way to addressing that problem. And I think that, you know, at least within our scope as a school committee, and given the cost ratios here, relative to the $7 million that we could potentially spend to air condition the building, 2/3 of $7 million is a far cry from $200 and some odd thousand. So in my mind, this seems like prudent spending and good progress, whereas the alternative is to probably start over and not get this far in the long run anyway. So I support this.
Other comments from the committee?
I just have to agree with Peter. I mean, yes, ideally we would love the whole building, but I mean, like you just said, 2/3 of the building is better than nothing. And I'd be really nervous as to not do anything now and then not be feasible in the future with the costs of everything. So no, I really support this. Something needs to be done.
Anyone else? I quite agree that this is the way to go. that 2/3 of the building being covered. Our concern was about children, particularly children who have health issues that need to be in space that is air conditioned. And those children, we can make sure they are in spaces that have coolant. So from our perspective as custodians of the building for use for education, this is the move that makes sense. There's no way we're getting $7 million. So this is the move that makes sense to me as well. So if we are in agreement, then I would need a motion to move forward with this air conditioning project as presented, as developed by Mr. Pusateri and Mr. Cassidy and Dr. Burnham and the team, and approve it so it can be moved forward to the town manager. Mr. Schoenbrini.
Did we actually take a roll call vote on the budget?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
You voted yes.
You never know.
I had a vote on yes, but I didn't have a tally, and I normally keep a tally, so I just wanted to make sure because we had a question. Okay.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the air conditioning project as presented.
And a second, please.
I'll second.
And a roll call vote.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Mrs. Ashambo.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We hope to hear good things on its route through the rest of the town government. So that is, that brings us to our second public comment. Is there anyone that has a public comment? Not seeing any public comments then? I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
I'll second.
And a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Beardmore,
Yes.
Mr. Schoenbrini,
Yes.
Mrs. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Leighton,
Yes.
Ashambo.
Yes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.